In the continuation of the lecture, anatomy of ear, we are going to now talk about the internal ear, especially its sensory receptors and transmission of sound. Functionally, the sensory receptors or balance are organized into the unique structures and each of the components of vestibular apparatus. In the utricle and saccule, this sense organ is the macula, and in the ampulla of each of these semicircular canal, there is crista. So basically, there are two sensory receptors, macula in utricle and saccule, and crista in ampullary part of three semicircular ducts. The utricle responds to the centrifugal and vertical acceleration, while the saccule responds for the linear or straight acceleration or movement. In contrast, the receptors in the three semicircular ducts respond to the movement in any direction. So here you can see the two enlarged part, one from the ampulla part. You can see here there are hair cells, there are nerve fibers and hair bundles which are going to be, there will be movement, then they are also going to move, and then they are going to generate the electrical wave which will be transferred to the concerned part of the brain. Same will happen in the macula also, macula of either utricle or saccule, but here some description is different. Here there are two types of hair cells are present, type 1 and type 2, which are just like a rod and cone cells of the retina. Then upper part they have stereocilia, which is going to move with the inside the otolithic membrane. So they are also going to convey the message to the brain only, and from there the vestibular branch will help the next part. Other sensory organ will be the cochlear duct. So cochlear duct has a central position in the cochlea of bony labyrinth, dividing it into two parts, as we have already seen, the scala vestibuli on the above side and scala tympani on the lower side. It is maintained in its position because it is directly attached to the centrally to the lamina of modulus, which is the part of bony labyrinth. That's why the position of cochlear duct is always maintained in the middle of scala vestibuli and scala tympani. As you can see in this diagram, scala vestibuli on the upper side, scala tympani on the lower side. In the middle, there is cochlear duct. Cochlear duct have some specific membranes. On the upper side, it is differentiated from the lesional membrane. On the perilymph, the content of scala vestibuli. On the lower side, there is basilar membrane. On this basilar membrane only, there is organ of Corti, which is actually the responding organ for the hearing, having some hair cells and which are going to move, and then the nerve which are present there, that is the branches of cochlear nerve, they are going to carry the message towards the respective part of the brain. Organ of hearing, as already we have talked, it is a triangular shape. There is the outer wall, which is against the bony cochlea, which is thickened. There is a roof, which is vestibular surface membrane, which separates the endolymph in the cochlear duct from the perilymph of the scala vestibuli with the regional membrane, as we have seen. Then there is a flow which separates again the endolymph in the cochlear duct from perilymph in the scala tympani, which is with the help of basilar membrane. The spiral organ is the organ of hearing, which rests on the basilar membrane and projects into the enclosed endolymphoid cochlear duct. So this is the arrangement which you can see about the each of the organ of Corti inside the cochlear duct. Next, we are going to talk about the vessels, that is blood supply of the internal ear. So there are basically two parts, bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth. So there are two types of blood vessels also, or two groups of blood vessels you can say. The bony labyrinth is supplied by the same arteries that supply the surrounding temporal bone also, like anterior tympanic branch from the maxillary artery, stylomastoid branch from the posterior auricular artery, and a petrosal branch from the middle pharyngeal artery. So basically, three branches are going to supply. You have to remember the names plus their source also. The membranous labyrinth is supplied only by the labyrinth artery, but the source may be two places. Either it may be from the anterior inferior cerebral artery, or it may be a direct branch of the basilar artery. Actually, anterior inferior cerebral artery is the branch of basilar artery. So whatever may be the origin, it enters the internal acoustic meatus along with facial nerve and glossopharyngeal nerve, and eventually divides into two parts: the cochlear branch, which passes through the modulus, the central part, and supplies the cochlear duct, and one or two vestibular branches which supplies the vestibular apparatus containing utricle, saccule, and semicircular ducts. For the venous return, the venous drainage of the membranous labyrinth is through the vestibular vein and cochlear vein, which follow the respective arteries. These come together to form the labyrinth vein, which eventually empties into the inferior petrosal sinus or the sigmoid sinus, which is extradural. So here you can see the basilar arteries there. The basilar artery is going to give the branch inferior cerebral artery. So either labyrinth artery may be a branch of anterior cerebral artery, or it may be a direct branch of basilar artery also. So both may be the cases. Next come the innervations. So basically it is supplied or innervated by the 8th cranial nerve, that is vestibulocochlear nerve, which carries both the senses for hearing as well as the for balancing part. It enters the lateral surface of brainstem between the pons and medulla, and after exiting the temporal bone through the internal acoustic meatus, it divides into two parts, that is cochlear nerve and vestibular nerve. The vestibular nerve enlarges to form the vestibular ganglion, and after that it divides into two parts, superior and inferior, which distributes among the utricle, saccule, and semicircular ducts. The cochlear nerve in hand enters the base of cochlea, passes upwards through the modulus, and there it is going to wind around the modulus and supply the particular receptor part of the organ of Corti. So here you can see the common nerve, then it is divided into cochlear part and vestibular part. After the vestibular ganglion, it is having two parts. The superior part basically supplies the utricle and anterior and lateral ampulla, and the inferior part basically supplies the saccule and posterior membranous part of ampulla. Now here we have to also talk about the facial nerve, which actually does not give any supply to this particular part, but it is in very close proximity to it, and it stays there for certain time also. So the facial nerve is closely associated with vestibulocochlear nerve, as it enters the internal acoustic meatus of the temporal bone. Traveling through the temporal bone, its path and several branches are directly related to the internal and medial ear. The facial nerve enters the internal acoustic meatus in the petrous part of temporal bone, along with the vestibulocochlear nerve and labyrinth artery. At the distal end of the internal acoustic meatus, the facial nerve enters the facial canal, which we have seen as the bulge in the medial part or the medial wall of the medial ear. And at this point, the enlarges and bends posteriorly and laterally. This enlargement is called sensory geniculate ganglion. Remember the word geniculate ganglion. As the facial nerve continues, the facial nerve turns sharply downward, vertically downward you can say, and running in an almost downward direction. It exits through the skull through the stylomastoid foramen. So this is the place, stylomastoid foramen, from which it is going to come out, and then it is going to give the 5 major motor branches to the face along with some other branches also. Let's understand this facial nerve course with this particular ray diagram. From here to the nucleus, motor nucleus and solitary nucleus, then a nervous intermedius is generated, which is called as facial nerve. Then it passes forward direction through the internal acoustic meatus and forms the geniculate ganglion. Through the geniculate ganglion, it gives two branches, greater petrosal nerve and lesser petrosal nerve. The first one is towards the pterygopalatine ganglion, and second one is for the otic ganglion. Then it passes downward, giving some small branches like nerve to stapes. Then it passes through the stylomastoid foramen and exits the skull, giving branches to the digastric, stylohyoid muscles and 5 facial motor branches like temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical. But before getting out through the stylomastoid foramen, it gives a big branch, quadrant tympani, which along with lingual nerve is going to give to the supply to the tongue part, along with submandibular and sublingual glands. So this is the total course in the branches of facial nerve, which you have to understand. If you want to count down the branches, there are too many, but some major ones are like this. That is the greater petrosal nerve, which is the first branch of the facial nerve. Continuing beyond this bend, the position of facial nerve is indicated on the medial wall. So this is the place from where we have identified the facial canal bulge. Next part is near to the beginning of vertical descent, the facial nerve gives a small branch which is nerve to stapes, and before exiting it gives the cauda tympani, which we have already seen in the ray diagram. Same diagram is here also. These are the some diagrams from the dissection point of view, which are highly magnified. You can go through one by one and try to understand it. Next part is the transmission of sound. How the sound is transmitted from the external part to the internal part. And it is demonstrated here in a ray diagram again, which is downward. A sound wave enters the external acoustic meatus through the pinna and strikes the tympanic membrane, moving it medially. As the handle of malleolus is attached to this membrane, the handle of malleus also moves medially. This movement of head of malleus laterally, and as the head of malleus is already attached with the incus, then the incus is also going to move lateral side. This movement of lateral side head of incus will move the long process of incus on the medial side, which is directly attached with the stapes. So the movement causes the stapes also to move towards the medial side. And in turn, because the base of stapes is attached to the oval window, the oval window is also going to move medially. These are the main components: the tympanic membrane, ear ossicles, and the internal part, how the movement is going to happen. This is a good diagram. You can say a tuning fork is vibrated near the ear pinna. The sound wave represent the alternating areas of high and low waves, which are depicted as the wavelengths, frequency of sound waves. Then it reaches the tympanic membrane, which vibrates in response to the sound wave. The vibrations are amplified across the ossicles. Then it moves towards the oval window, setting up the movement in the fluid of vestibuli. In that particular fluid, pressure bends the membrane of cochlear duct at the maximum vibration for the greater frequency, causing the hair cells in the basilar membrane to vibrate. So actually the sound wave never directly transfers to the organ of Portae, but it is the movement in the scala vestibuli and scala tympani that are perceived by the basilar membrane through the organ of Portae, and then it is transferred to the brain. So this is the magnified view of an organ of Portae with certain named cells, which you can remember, like cells of Henson, cells of Claudius, which have some different functions to be described later on. Next, this action which has reached to a large amplitude, low force airborne wave that vibrates the tympanic membrane into small amplitude, high force vibration of oval window generates a wave in the fluid filled scala vestibuli. The wave established in the perilymph of the scala vestibuli moves the cochlea and causes the outward bulging of the secondary tympanic membrane, which is actually the covering the round window at the end of scala tympani. This causes the basilar membrane to vibrate, which in turn stimulates the receptor cells in the spiral organ or organ of Portae. So here you can see some magnification is going to happen, amplification in the middle ear, and then this is going to be perceived by the spiral organ of Portae in the internal ear or cochlear part. The receptor cell sends the impulses back to the brain through the cochlear part of vestibulocochlear nerve, where they are interpreted as sound. In the meantime, if the sound is too loud, causing excessive movement of tympanic membrane, then the muscle tensor tympani, which is attached to the malleolus, and the muscle stapes, which is attached to the stapes, are going to dampen the vibrations. They are going to decrease the amplitude and decrease the force of vibration reaching to the oval window, thus saving us to get our organs also safe from getting the deafness or damage. So if in starting it is 2000 hertz, 20,000 hertz, at the end it only reaches to the 200 hertz only. So nearly 1/100 part is going to be demolished if there is too much high frequency sound is there. So this is also one of the function of your ear part or internal ear part actually in the cochlear duct. So this is how we can summarize the whole of the transmission. Number one, you can see the area also in diagram, that is ear canal. The sound waves enters the outer ear and travel to the middle ear. Number two, the sound waves causes the eardrum to vibrate. You see the marking in the diagram also. Number three, there are three muscle bones, malleus, incus, stapes, which amplify these vibration and send them to the inner ear through the oval window. Then the vibration hit the snail-shaped cochlea, which is lined with the sensory receptors called hair cell. We have seen two types of hair cells were there, hair cell 1 and hair cell 2. Then at number 5, in the cochlea itself only, the head cell moves and vibrate in the response to the sound, triggering to the release of neurotransmitters, which are perceived by the auditory nerve and sent to the brain, where they are interpreted for the specific meaning. So this is how we can summarize the total transmission of sound, specifically in the inner ear. So that's all for this long topic of anatomy of ear. We have completed the gross anatomy part. For clinical anatomy part, we will have to have one more lecture. So I think after going through all this lecture, you will be highly benefited to understand the anatomy of ear, whether external, middle, or internal ear. Thank you very much.